Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahi, Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cover with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. There is a second law of thermodynamics, if you're in any way interested in science, that tells us that things go from a state of disorder, or a state of order, we might say, to disorder. But then there's another school of thought, perhaps, which might think that we go the other way around, from disorder to order. Whichever way you look at it, that means with the human being, there's no doubt that we have learned to create order and complexity from chaos. But chaos has its own laws. And so we have to move away from the idea of entropy to understand more about chaos, because tonight we're talking about the beauty of chaos. And I have in front of me 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And there we describe, sometimes in metaphorical language, symbolic language, what seems to be the whole of the cosmos. But it's not a cosmos that is studied independently by cosmologists and scientists. There is the idea, let us say from Isaac Newton, that the whole world, the whole of existence as we know it, has at its base certain laws which are purely mechanical. That means if the whole universe is like a machine, with all the cogs in place and so on, and provided we know all the variables, all the inputs, we can absolutely, with precision, predict anything in the future. A thoroughly deterministic universe. And so we can know the future if we know the current parameters and conditions. It's as simple as that. But as modern science has progressed and increased, it's not quite that simple. In mathematics, geometry, say, we can draw circles and squares and rectangles and octagonal formations and so on. We don't find any of these in nature. We don't find a perfectly round cloud. We don't find perfectly symmetrical trees. We find that the beauty of nature, as we understand it, is in its irregularity, otherwise it becomes very dull. And so we can immediately appreciate the beauty because we have an artistic eye that understands how beautiful it is to see a branch twist and curve. The curiosity about a tree, though, is there is a tree trunk, but there are branches that are mini tree trunks. And they branch off into smaller branches and smaller twigs, and finally a small end of it. Not only that, but there's a leaf, and if we study the structure of the leaf, what will you find? The same pattern repeating. You'll find that there is a small kind of stem, and there are branches even on the leaf. And so we can see this repeatedly throughout the whole of nature. And so there is such a thing called chaos theory. It's a kind of interdisciplinary area in scientific study. It's also a branch of a particular kind of mathematics that's focused on these underlying patterns that I'm talking about. And the deterministic laws of all these moving dynamic systems are laid out and are highly sensitive to the initial conditions. And we know that one initial condition, just a small variation, will have the capacity to repeat. And it is this repetition that creates the patterns. And these patterns are wonderfully beautiful. This variation without which, how could we really distinguish? We've just spent, the last 2 days, a devotee and myself, cleaning up the communal garden, and we can see the whole idea of competition and struggle. There's a certain plant, there's a proliferation of seeds, and now dominates. Those who do the Enneagram will know this is a number 8 plant, obviously. And you see we have to remove all of that because it's strangling things like roses. And roses that have been planted, 6 of them, 6 rose plants, were completely strangled because nobody was attending to this. So we decided, let us attend to it. And in attending to it, we managed to make the garden beautiful. And yet, there's so much variety within the garden. There is a knowledge and instinct within the plants. You don't require a neurological system for it, apparently. And so we can see that the wonderful arrangement that we have and the variation of varieties, they're all looking for the same thing. They're all looking for sunlight. And they're all looking to reach it. And they're all looking to be platforms for bees. There were so many bees that were alighting on the plants today. It was even painful to remove the plants because we've also removed the source of collecting pollen for the bees. Oh, there's plenty left. And so, but even that is a harmonious arrangement. If we watch a beehive, for example, we'll see all bees behaving in a very similar way. They'll be behaving in a unity. They'll have specifically designed jobs. Even in an ant's colony, there'll be those that are delegated to be workers, to collect food. Others will be looking after the queen ant. Others will be involved in reproducing. Others will be involved in defending. Each one has a role. And so they're all working in unity. However, we can also see the variety of it, because nature has a way of making a movement not exactly the same, not precisely the same. Now, the discovery of this and its repercussions, a term was coined. It's called the butterfly effect. So a butterfly flaps its wings, let us say in South America. Will it create a hurricane at some other corner of the world? Well, theoretically, yes, because it is not just a movement, it's a movement that then reproduces and passes on beyond itself because of this interconnectedness. And the ultimate interconnectedness that we have is to view this cosmos in a different way as a vast human person. The Purusha Sukta, part of the Rig Veda, will declare that this universe is like a huge body. And here we see it again in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And so it's worth studying it and having a different view of it. Because then, whatever we see by itself is a wonder. The wonder increases when we register it to the divine. Lord, that's your eye there, and that's your eye there. We can look at a spinning galaxy, and our range of experience has increased. Because there was a time, of course, when we thought that the solar system was the only thing, and then we thought that the galaxy was the only thing. And now we see, countless galaxies, innumerable suns, not just one. And the revelation to Arjuna by Krishna tells us exactly that story and creates a sense of wonder, also creates a sense of fear, because within the whole scheme of things is destruction. And so the question that we had here was, this law of destruction, it's there. We go toward entropy, that means a continued movement to disorder. Is that just the finality of it? No, not necessarily, because somehow it is a cycle, not an end. It's not a linear thing. And so we may go from negative entropy, that is simplicity, and then we go into complexity, and then we go into disorder, and then we go into simplicity again, leading not only to an explanation of why there is life itself sustained, but also an answer to the whole pattern of existence. And what we find really is patterns repeat. This is in chaos theory. Now, if patterns repeat, we could logically think, well, maybe this universe operates in a cyclical way. And that's exactly what the ancient Indian philosophies, or cosmologies even, would declare, that everything moves out, is projected. We may call it creation. That's okay, it's a convenience term only. Projected from itself and goes on, let's say, for eons, and then dissolves back into its primal potentiality, which we call Laya. And that whole Prakriti nature is kept in potentiality and erupts again. And we have literally eons and eons of time in human calculation that we understand. For example, one day of the creator Brahma, creator meaning the cosmic mind from which everything else comes, the creative mind of the universe, or the personal God. That one day of that is something like 4.3 million years, a billion years, I should say, 4.3 billion years. Now, presumably, poor Brahma has to sleep, so that's a double it, so 8.6 billion years. And then that is, one day. And then we have to calculate that Brahma lives for 100 years. Now, if you make that calculation, we're going into trillions and trillions. So this arrangement, I may have the figures slightly wrong, but this arrangement is millions and billions of years. Carl Sagan said that this way of thinking is the nearest to our modern way of cosmology time. And like many of the other religions, Hinduism has this advantage that we're talking of incalculable spans of time. That's if you take time from the human point of view. And I think that's wrong, because time is just a relative thing. And from our point of view, it's just a calculation of of our movement around the sun, that's all. In any event, the way we value the world comes to a new kind of position of wonder, adoration, and thankfulness if we understand that this whole thing is the Lord of the universe, projected in a life, a cosmic and cosmological life, and then withdrawn, dies and withdraws again, like that, and emerges again. That means there can be no question of death anywhere in the universe, just transformations, that's all. Now, there's one interpretation like that. Another interpretation is that it happens all the time, that at the border, let us say, of the whole universe, the observable universe, I should say, we are restricted by the speed of light. That's our speed limit. And therefore, we can only see from that point of view. So, from the observer's point of view, things are moving away, as it were. They are redshifted. This was a discovery by Hubble in the 1920s already, or later, I should say. And then things are moving away. And so the natural conclusion would be that if you then wind the movie backwards, you come to a singularity point with 0 time, 0 space. But a different way of thinking would be maybe there's a steady state going on, a recycling at the local level. And at that border, then the atoms tunnel back in. Subatomic particles come back in. And that explains why we find new pockets of hydrogen. Now there are these different models. And one of the most astute scientists, mathematicians that we know, Roger Penrose, is in favor of a recycling model, a continuous eon arrangement like that. The point is, whether these are true or not, when we want to look at something to get the maximum from it, we have to look at it with new eyes, from a new point of view, a fresh point of view, a creative point of view. And there's one thing that has been discovered, and that is this chaos theory and the beauty of it. And chaos theory will say that from completely random states of disorder and irregularities, there is some kind of absolute arrangement which creates surprises. We easily find examples for it. Let's take the weather, particularly Irish weather. It's completely unpredictable. You may predict trends. You may have a very clever meteorological office and satellite observations, but it doesn't take much to catch us by surprise. And yet, you see, there's a repeated pattern within it as well. So, the chaos theory states that within this apparent randomness of chaotic complex systems, there are underlying patterns, interconnections, constant feedback loops, repetition, self-similarity, and an arrangement, a repeated arrangement called fractals, where we can calculate something to be repeated, and within that, many, many beautiful complex patterns we can see. The world we see is not exactly what we see under a microscope. And the world at the macrocosmic scale is not exactly what we see in your kitchen. Things look different. This is a relative of your perception. So, from apparently randomness, chaotic complex systems, these underlying patterns and themes can be there. And as I say, this has been coined the butterfly effect, an underlying principle of chaos under everything. And it describes how a small change in one state of a deterministic nonlinear system can result in large differences in a later state down the road. And that means that there is a sensitive dependence on some small initial conditions. And when we look at it properly in the light of Purushottama, cosmic person, then we come to the conclusion that these initial conditions and small variations are built into this cosmic person, because that's where we get creativity from. Without these variations, we don't create creativity. And if we leave it up to man, judging from modern cities and their buildings, we'll find straight lines everywhere. Straight lines, cubes, squares. You won't find this in nature. Nature has much more creativity than that. And this creativity must come from what we might say, for convenience sake, a creator. And that is why there is this understanding that if there's a cosmic person, a cosmic body which is there, then it is a result of a divine cosmic mind. And that cosmic mind is what we call creator. In Hindu mythology, we call it Brahma, from a root Brah, the thing that expands, same root as Brahman. And so there's a necessity for creativity that has to have this random variation within it. But then there are certain laws, deterministic laws, that we notice. And that is what keeps things going in a certain rhythm. And so in Hinduism, there's a second member of the Trinity called Vishnu. That is a sustaining aspect of it, keeping things going. We might say now we've covered birth and life, but there also has to be death. There also has to be a demise of it. And so that demise is a mixture of the laws and the variations, the creativity side of it and the preserving side of it together mixed will produce this, what we call Shiva. And so a metaphor is this butterfly effect. Because this behavior is like a butterfly flapping its wings, let's say in Texas, and it causes a tornado in Brazil. Is it possible? Is it likely? It was never thought of before, but there are some clues about how it works. Now, some of these clues really will come from the observation of patterns. A very, very clever person called Turing, who was very dynamic in the Second World War and breaking codes, part of a team that did that, a brilliant, brilliant scientist. And he managed to see patterns. Why do leopards have spots? Why do giraffes have certain patterns on their coat? Why do cows have certain patterns? And he was able to observe in a mathematical way that these patterns can be recurring themes and lead us to, or lead him anyway, to a certain mathematical construction. Somebody else would observe that if you put some nutrients in a petri dish, some organic chemicals, let us say, they spontaneously arrange themselves in beautiful, glorious, unrepeatable patterns. This was a certain Russian. And then, of course, we find other ways of looking at this. We find this repeatability. And that is a secret within life. And so we can see, for example, we know that winds blow desert sands, and we know that they form ripples, but no ripple is the same. We find them all in variations because that's how nature is. Creative and beautiful. And when we look at that beauty, what is our advantage? It gives us the advantage for an internal elevation of spirit, a kind of thankfulness, but we shouldn't take it for granted. There are small differences in these, let's say, initial conditions, and because of these, maybe due to, let's say, errors in measurement or due to difficulties in numerical computations and things, it can yield widely diverging outcomes for such dynamic kinds of systems. And so the long-term prediction of behaviors are impossible in general. We can say things look good in the future, but we have no idea about it because of these unpredictable variations. And so we can see that even though generally systems are deterministic, that means that their future behavior follows a certain unique unfoldment, development, growth, evolution. And we can fully determine these things from their initial conditions. When there is no variation or no random elements involved, nature comes in and gives us a curveball. The deterministic nature of these systems doesn't make them predictable. And so this behavior is technically called really deterministic chaos, or simply just chaos. There was a man, scientist Edward Lorenz, who makes the statement: when the present determines the future, but the approximate present does not approximately determine the future, this is called chaos. And we find this kind of behavior in all these natural systems, including things like fluid flow, a river, then taking an unpredictable course, going here, going there. And we see the repeatability of it, of the pattern, a small stream, and then a small rivulet, like branches going everywhere, like artificial components, highways and byways, road traffics of nature. And so that kind of behavior can indeed be studied. It's studied through the analysis of a certain chaotic mathematical model, so it's not entirely incomprehensible. And through these analytical techniques, we can see a recurrence of plots, a recurrence of themes. And this applies to everything. So it has its practical application, this theory, in a lot of disciplines. Meteorology is one thing that we have discussed, but also anthropology, sociology, environmental issues and sciences, and even economics. The stock is there and then there's a crash. And so there are complex dynamic systems that are involved in this. And this includes a kind of self-assembly process. Now, if you're a reductionist materialist, you'll say, well, if there is a self-assembly process, there's no need for any divine hand behind it. But that doesn't explain why there should be a self-assembly process from a seeming insensitive or, non-organic system. The wind blows sand. Sand arranges itself. It's a kind of self-assembly process. It must be inherent in nature. It is part of the creative expression of this divine Purushottama. So, in fact, in common usage, of course, when we talk about chaos, we're talking about a state of disorder. But in chaos theory, the term is defined much more precisely. It's not exactly total chaotic disorder. And it's universally accepted that the mathematical definition of chaos it's a commonly used definition, which says that to classify a dynamic system that's going on, it must have certain properties. First of all, it must be sensitive to these initial conditions. Secondly, it must be, transitive. And then it has to have dense periodic orbits. Now, we don't have to understand any of these things. Suffice to say that there are certain patterns, and all the patterns are beautiful. And we can see these repeating patterns. So these factors are discussed by scientists at great length. But from our point of view, all we're interested in is that there's a creative process that involves the beauty of variation. And we can wonder at this beauty of variation going on. And this, I think, is expressed beautifully in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. We'll pick up a few passages. Firstly, we have to understand the background to this 11th chapter, that Arjuna has heard from the Lord, namely Krishna, that the universe is supported by a mere fraction of his energy. This is worthy of reflection. No matter what energy we find anywhere in the universe, the whole of it, and there's no reason to believe that Krishna doesn't know the full extent of the whole universe, because it's described as the Purushottama, that this whole body, which we call the universe, this is being sustained by only a fraction of divine potential energy. That in itself is worth a meditation. And so, of course, naturally, like any curious person, Arjun becomes curious about this cosmic form. What is it like? And that forms the basis of this 11th chapter. And so we can pick up after this request. So truly, that is Bhavapya, Bhavapyayo vibhutan tas bhutan vam shuto vistarasa maya. The term maya is now being used. That requires some explanation. So truly, what? The origin and dissolution of all beings. Now, anything that has a dissolution or end has an origin, and everything that has an origin has a dissolution, if you look at this in a cyclical way. So of all beings, and beings includes all the things that move everywhere, I've heard from you, including those things, those beings that we don't necessarily see. There may be parallel universes within our own, other beings. That's quite likely. So he says, I've heard from you in detail, and as also of your inexhaustible greatness. Sometimes we think of this author of the universe as remote from us, and we have such epithets as, you are great, you are wonderful, you are marvelous, etc., as if God responds to flattery. But nevertheless, we're simply expressing our own inner feeling when we look at it properly, to see the grandeur, the wonder, just as when anybody discovers something wondrous, be it in a flower or be it in the rotating galaxies. And so, I want to see your divine form, says Arjuna. I want to see your Aishwaram Purushottama. Dustam Ichani Te Rupam Aishwaram Purushottama. So, in other words, Arjuna is desiring all the things that every astrophysicist and cosmologist wants to see. Only he's acknowledging, I can understand that this whole thing is your form. This is the piece that is missing. And so, I don't know if anybody is qualified to see this, and Arjuna eventually gets frightened by it. But we're looking for this eternal self presented in different forms. And so, immediately the Lord gives Arjuna a vision and says, look at my forms, behold my forms, by hundreds and thousands manifold and divine and of various colors and shapes. Now we know from pictures sent to us. I have a beautiful book which is compiled by a certain astronomer who is, his name is Brian May, and he was a member of a rock band, but he's taken up astronomy.
Queen,
yeah. Yes, with great interest. Mm-hmm. And I have a book that was given to me, and with the most astonishing photographs of phenomena within the universe. And yes, all manner of different colors, because colors represent the different elements that we find in the universe itself, the spectrum, if you will. And so all of these various colors and shapes. Now, in everyday life, we see various colors and shapes. Do we have that same appreciation? Do we register it and say, oh Lord, you are there? And if you don't, you've misinterpreted what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're tasting, what you're experiencing. Registering it to the Lord. In various places it says, You should see the self in all beings in the self, and then see me, says Krishna. Personalize it. So see your very favorite, most intimate form of God in every being, in every person. Why do the eyes shine except for that? Why do the ears hear except for that? Why do the vocal cords produce any sound, be it good or bad, be it flattering or be it blaming? Still, a sound is coming out, and the whole marvel of intelligence is there. The flash processing of information in the human brain is phenomenal. You may say that machines can do something. Yeah, they can do it, but not the full range. They can only do certain things much more quickly, no doubt, than the human brain and so on, but not with the scope. And so somehow cells are able to collect together and fire away in an electrical way. And we say, oh, I thought this, I thought that. Like a kind of lightning going off in the internal cells of the brain. What a wonderful thing that is. And we don't even notice it. The capacity to think. Now, all of this is recognizing divine grace arriving at this point, which we call human being. And so there it is, in different shapes. We may joke about that a little bit, you see, because now there's political correctness. You can't say somebody's fat. You can only say they're horizontally challenged. Anyway, behold, in all the adityas, that means all the scope of time, and time is a relative thing. There are 8 adityas. Sorry, there are 12 adityas, I should say. 12 adityas, because there are 12 months of the year that represents the whole scope of time. And then there are 8 vasus. Vasu, something that is a dwelling, some person occupying a dwelling place, vasu, an internal dweller. Is this not space? Why 8? Well, because there are various directions. There are 4 cardinal directions and 4 intermediate directions wherever you look. It's a symbol of space. And then there are the 11 rudras. 11 rudras, well, how do you observe all of these things if it wasn't for the senses? Rudras, 11, that is, these are things that need to be controlled and are potentially stormy, namely the sense organs plus the mind. 10 sense organs are there, and information is necessary in all systems. All energetic systems require information. It's one of the laws. And information is preserved, and nature has a way of rubbing out useless information. Or when something has reached a limit, then it gets replaced. The other day, I think I was mentioning, in fact, I think it was last Tuesday already, we were mentioning the slimy mold, how it manages to negotiate pathways, and when they find it's not working, they rub it all out. So you can't go there again. They leave a mark, say they leave an exit sign, as it were. Don't go here. Road closed. We tried it, it doesn't work. And so the whole of life is an exploratory nature with great enthusiasm. It's because of this exploratory nature that we ourselves investigate every single avenue, even in philosophy. I remember that there was a debate at some point, and it was pointed out, you see, we don't start off with, I'm here, where is God? We start off with, I am here, what is that? What is my environment? Make these inquiries. And these inquiries occur in the Upanishads. Upanishads are inquiries. And this Bhagavad Gita is full of these inquiries, full of these questions, and full of the answers too, from every possible conceivable angle you can think of. And then 2 Ashwins and Maruts and so on. These are all these energetic forces are there. And many wonders, says Arjun, that I have never seen before. Uhunya drasyanapurvanu pasya Skaryani Bharata. Then, Ihai Kristam Jagat Kristam. Behold here today the whole universe of the moving and the unmoving. In other words, the moving I can see, but now you're showing me things which I couldn't see before, the unmoving. And I see in general experience that there are things like rocks that don't move or don't seem to move. You look at them closely, of course, they're full of dynamic energy. And then, of course, there are things that obviously move at various paces, including atoms. And don't forget, in science, your heretic today is your hero tomorrow. There's a great man, Boltzmann. He died in 1906. He committed suicide, hung himself because, of course, he had some difficulty, mental difficulties, but he dared to tell his scientific community, I think the ancient Greeks are right. I think there's great evidence that the whole of matter has a very small series of components called atoms. And not only did they ridicule him, they ridiculed him mercilessly. Brilliant, brilliant scientist, Boltzmann. And of course, even before he died, it was discovered that Brownian motion was discovered, and it didn't reach his ears yet. And it would have verified, yes, you're correct. This is evidence for it. Now, today, nobody even questions. And then, of course, as time goes on, a greater discovery. Not only do we find that there are atoms, that there are protons, and there are electrons, and it would seem to be something like that, something like a planetary kind of system. But it's just a marvel because of this random creativity is there, which we're mentioning. Things which are unseen and things which are seen. Nobody has seen an electron. Atoms have been put in or fired into a cloud chamber, and there we can see traces, we can see trails of things like electrons. But here's the wonder and the big questions. So supposing we are to take a football, something the size of a football, and say this is a proton. The nearest electron is 0.8 kilometers away. And how is it that that electron doesn't lose its momentum and fall into the proton? And the proton is exceedingly small. It's about 100th or something like that. It's minute, 100th of the size of the atom itself, something like that, probably less. So, or probably more, probably smaller, who knows? And so that itself has been smashed, and there we find quarks. And so it became a very complex system. So modern science is advancing more and more because we realize the ephemeral nature of things because at the very fundamental level, we find there is the incomprehensible laws of subatomic physics, not compatible with the walking, waking world we are used to. Not at all deterministic, but really thoroughly employing this pattern of chaos. So there are things that we need to contemplate. Modern science offers us, and some people say, I'm not into science, that's not my area of interest, I like art. Well, when you see visibly all these patterns and themes unseen by the human eye, then art comes in. The whole of abstract art will attempt to capture all of this. Instead of going to the deterministic areas where we see things with the eyes and try to copy it through art, very precisely following set rules, which change from time to time, no doubt, and certain schools of art in terms of painting. And then what we find is a revolution taking place. Maybe things are a little more fussy than that. Or maybe we can capture the abstract ideas or feelings of something like that and put it. That is also art, no doubt. Some may feel that has gone to an extreme. That's your personal taste. But no doubt, the beauty of the unseen, when you look at something microscopically in its great, great detail, and how these patterns faithfully repeat over and over again, producing the world that we see. Very simple patterns, but beautiful patterns amidst complexity. And so this is some of the things that are revealed to Arjun. And so he says, whatever, he says, na tumam sakshase drustam. But you cannot see me with these eyes of yours, the Lord says. Not with the physical eyes. I give you divine sight. In order to explore the truth, we need this divine sight. In order to discover the inner reality, we need divine insight. What is the evidence of divine existence? It is in insight. It is in inspiration. It is in introspection. It is in taking an internal journey, not an external one. You can't see it with the outside world, outside eyes, but you can see the manifestation of it, the creation. That is your evidence on the outside. What is your actual evidence to see me, let us say the creator? That requires an internal journey. And so, behold my supreme power of yoga, because this is where we have the insight from. The internal grace of revelation comes to us when we take the effort to go inward through prayer, japa, and meditation. That internal journey is necessary. And so, it was all shown. The great supreme divine form was shown. The Param Rupam Aishwaram. And then it goes on. With many mouths and eyes presenting many wondrous sight, with many heavenly ornaments and with many celestial weapons uplifted. In other words, we can see all of this in poetic eyes and recognize with our artistic creative sense all the beautiful things around us and register them in this way. And we can see how when we look at flowers, we can say, wearing celestial gardens and apparel, anointed with heavenly perfumes, all wonderful, resplendent, boundless, with faces on all sides, omnipresent, you see. If the splendor of 1,000 suns were to blaze forth all at once in the sky, that might be like the splendor of the mighty one. This verse was supposed to be repeated by Oppenheimer when he saw the explosion of the atomic bomb. Divi Surya Sahasrasya Vaved Yugapad Uttita Yadi Baha Sadrashisha Shadvasas Tasya Mahatmanaha. If the splendor of 1,000 suns were to blaze forth all at once in the sky, it might be like the splendor of that mighty one, displayed as the whole cosmos, and displayed as this miniature cosmos called the human being and the human world. And there in the body of the God of gods, the son of Pandu then saw the whole universe with its manifold divisions resting in one. What a beautiful, beautiful concept. We can use this either for the cosmos or for our own internal purposes. Don't forget, Katha tells us this is an 11-gated city. We can see this as our miniature universe and to get the same appreciation, and then see all the satellite universes around. People talk about the multiverse. Yes, this is being a universe here. Then there's another universe there, and a vast space in between. Most of what we view as space, by the way, is pretty much empty. If you were to take all the 8 billion people on the planets and suck out the space in between all the atoms, it would all fit into, although the mass wouldn't change, but it would all fit into something the size of an apple. Imagine. So, where are we? Divine Mother, Holy Mother Sharada Devi said, we are but a few pounds of flesh, I think it calculated, 7 pounds of ashes. We are about 7 pounds of ashes, something like that, or 4 pounds of ashes. She mentions an amount, I think it amounts to about 2.2 kilograms. That's all. That's all we are. And so, then of course, Arjuna now, called Dhananjaya, is filled with wonder. And a thrill of this wonder exhibited how, by his hair standing on end, bowing his head before the Lord, and then he says the joined palms, I see all the deities, that is, all the revealing factors, all the shining things in the universe. I see it in your body. That's the key. And I see it in your body, as well as multitudes of all kinds of beings. I see the cosmic mind, the Lord Brahma, seated there on a lotus, and all the sages and celestial serpents. Now, reading this, please tell me, this is good for your meditation. Absolutely. Your meditation requires imagination, as you can hardly describe in words what Arjuna is seeing, and yet the Vyasa is attempting to put this down in words, in poetry. Countless arms, stomachs, mouths, eyes, possessing infinite forms on all sides. O cosmic form, I see neither your end, nor your middle, nor your beginning. And I see you all around. I see you all around. I see you with your diadem, your cloth, your discus, a mass of radiance shining everywhere, hard to look at, dazzling like the sun, blazing fire, and immeasurable. You are the imperishable, the supreme. Tvam aksharam paramam veritvam, the supreme being to be realized. You are the ultimate resting place of the universe. You say, Lord, you are the resting place of the universe. What is space? Viewed as the resting place of the universe, the gravitational field. What is it? It is the Lord of the universe sitting there. You're the undying guardian. You're looking after the universe well. You're the eternal guardian of what? The eternal laws that regulate everything and keep things in harmony and balance. And you are the primal being. There's no being without that being. That's the first being. And the others are manifestations going on from there. And again, Anadi, Marjantam, Ananta Viryam. I see you without beginning, without middle. I see you without end, of infinite power with infinite arms. Spiral galaxies have these arms. I see the sun and the moon, your eyes, the burning fire, your mouth, heating the whole universe with your radiance. Where does this radiation throughout the whole universe come from? Radiation means, you see, you look into the night sky, you'll see things shining because photons are there radiating. And intense activity is going on all the time, producing heat and radiation. And when small particles, hardly noticeable to the naked eye or even to the telescope, where they get radiated and re-radiated and re-radiated, are thermalized. And they're thermalized to roughly 3 Kelvin. I see you without beginning, middle, or end, of infinite power with infinite arms, and so on. Your mouth heating the whole universe with your radiance. You can see how this is expressed in beautiful poetic language. It requires poetry, it requires imagination to appreciate all of this. And the space between heaven and earth and all the quarters are filled with you alone. It's important. Every space is filled with you. We talk about empty space, no doubt, but every space is actually filled with you. Now there's a great discovery, because there's really no such thing as empty space. Because we know that in what we call empty space, we find it teeming potentiality, a kind of quantum foam arrangement where particles are appearing and disappearing, complete flashing and disappearing all the time. And this whole arrangement we call Maya. And so, having seen this wonderful and also terrible form of yours, the three worlds are trembling with fear, O great soul, because of your power. And so he goes on describing more and more and more. This is now, the 20th stanza, and this will go way up to the end. And the end only culminates essentially in another 10 or so stanzas, 20 stanzas or so, 40 stanzas are there and more. So,
can I ask a question, Swami?
Yes, 50 stanzas, 60
all of the
stanzas,
atomic theory was so unbelievable and so gripping and fascinating. But then along came quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
And it upset the apple cart again.
Yeah. Yes.
Quantum mechanics turned science on its head.
Yeah.
Because Niels Bohr and Einstein couldn't embrace Schrodinger's, and there was a couple of other races.
Yeah.
And there was two camps, wasn't there, for about
Absolutely,
50 years?
Yeah, and big arguments. Yeah.
But are they compatible? Are they?
Well, the Schrodinger equations we require, or I say we, I've never done a calculation in my life like that, but anyway. So Schrodinger equations are required in order to calculate the probability wave function, basically.
That was it. Wave and particle can be the same thing at different times.
Yeah. Whereas, but Heisenberg's uncertainty principle really was the concluding argument. It explained everything. Heisenberg. But his way of calculation was very difficult, was very awkward. It was a very complex matrix system. And so there was a big argument between the two, and Heisenberg was a younger person, representing the young Turks, really. Yeah. And then, there were the young, Heisenberg and Bohr, and versus, Schrodinger and Einstein, and there's others, the traditionists, you see, who didn't really want to abandon several years.
Atomic theory.
Yeah. However, it was Einstein who came up with the quantum idea. That's what he got his Nobel Prize for, by the way.
Right.
But then you see, he didn't like the quirkiness, the unusualness of it.
Spooky, he called it.
Spooky action at a distance was what was called quantum entanglement, because he felt it violated his precious special relativity, speed of light. Nothing can move faster than that. You cannot have, non-local activity. So so he was trying to find a way around that, and he brought up sensible objections all the time to Niels Bohr. And Niels Bohr was frightened. He is a very respected, world scientist, the genius of the 20th century. And so he was worried, but came back with destroying every argument that could be there. And the final argument really was a suggestion that there was maybe some variables in this that would explain the so-called fact that two subatomic particles, when they're engaged at any one moment, and as soon as they're disengaged, no matter how vast the distance, alteration of one immediately changes the other. And this has pretty much been proven. So Einstein was wrong on this occasion. Such a great man, but he was certainly wrong. And we know that.
I went to see the movie, what's it? Oppenheimer. Very good. Swami.
Okay.
Yes. 3 hours long. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because Einstein is in it, and Bohr, and he talks about was he the guy that the Nazis had under house arrest trying to invent the atomic bomb? Which is the German guy?
I don't think so. No, I don't think
that there was a race to get the hydrogen bomb between.
No, it wasn't Heisenberg. No, Heisenberg. He was an Austrian, as far as I know. I might be wrong on that, but he and Niels Bohr were the young champions of this new quantum mechanics, which just destroyed the traditional physics. And not only that, but you see Richard Feynman, who was a great physicist as well.
American, I heard about him.
Yeah. He introduced this quantum electrodynamics, which pretty much explained things which could not be explained, some of the difficulties there. And he did it not because it made any sense, but because it worked out fine. And he himself said, that I teach my students this, and they don't understand because I don't understand it. And he introduced this revolutionary system, which also the traditionalists didn't like, of Feynman diagrams, because the equations around this was so complicated, so complex. And so he tried to simplify it by making very small, simple diagrams. And he was ridiculed from it and given an extremely hard time, more than ridicule, like Boltzmann was too. And then he hooked up with Gell-Mann, I think it was. And anyway, they made a joint presentation, and all the scientists now, even today, will wonder at this great explanatory description of this phenomena through quantum electrodynamics, showing the different flavors and different characteristics and properties of these subatomic particles. All right, anyway, this is of interest to some, maybe not to others, but here's the point. The whole universe is the divine body of the Lord and should fill us with wonder. And even if we cannot see beyond our borders of the earth, then at least we can see the earth itself and all its marvels. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.